Good morning. The World Economic Forum wants you to eat the bug so nothing can be happy. You can opt out by reading the books. Tyson's Foods, the second largest processor of chicken, beef and pork, is paired up with Protix to add bugs into your foods, bugs into animal feed. Australia and Singapore, Switzerland, the UK, USA have all made bug food legal. Joining us today is Brian DeMint. He wrote a whole book called Parallel. It's a blueprint on how to opt out and survive outside the forced agenda of the World Economic Forum, the Bank of International Settlements, the IMF, and opt out with resistance money. First, we'll dive into the bugs and the WEF and then what's going on today in Bitcoin. Brian, welcome back to the show. How are you this morning?
It's such a pleasure to be on, man. I feel like it's been too long. I know we have little interactions on Twitter, but man, I definitely consider you a friend, and just happy to be able to hang out with you.
It definitely has been too long, and we'll catch up and go into a bit of a banter, but I want to show everyone this video that I saw circulating yesterday. Shout out to Lieutenant Dan for sharing a full video with me, but this is what's going on, and this is directly coming from the World Economic Forum. We'll dive into their agenda, and there's blatant disregard to the environment, especially prime farming land. I can show some great receipts here in Australia, but we'll play this video first.
Tyson has reached an agreement for a twofold investment with Protix. It's a leading global insect ingredients company. That investment will support the growth of the emerging insect ingredient industry and expand the use of insect ingredient solutions. Tyson and Protix also joining together for the operation and construction of an insect ingredient facility. Once that is complete, it'll be the first at-scale facility of its kind to upcycle food manufacturing byproducts into high-quality insect proteins and lipids, primarily to be used in the pet food, aquaculture, and livestock industries. Tyson.
Just really quickly, I'm just going to increase Brian's audio settings for a moment and just see if that is better for everyone while we're going through a banter. So what I want to show here is, this is straight off the World Economic Forum. I've got a couple of things to race through, and then I'll get Brian's thoughts this morning. 5 reasons why eating insects could reduce climate change. There is their go-to word there, climate change. It's always the propaganda machine. So help us prevent the spread of disinformation. This article has been intentionally misrepresented on sites that spread false information. Please read the piece for yourself before sharing or commenting. What I'm going to do, ladies and gentlemen, is I am going to handpick out my bias instead of what the World Economic Forum wants you to read out of here. Just to know, number one, edible insects can produce equivalent amounts of quality protein when compared to animals. Of course, not all insect protein is created equal. For instance, crickets and certain ant species, mealworms, and honeybee protein in calorie-dense stars in the insect consumption world. One easy way of integrating insect protein into your diet would be through cricket protein powder, used in place of your typical protein supplement powder. They require less care and upkeep than livestock. We're actually running out of protein. That's a scary thought. Protein is the workhorse of the human cell. Without it, the body cannot produce some of the essential amino acids we need to survive. By 2050, the Earth will have nearly 10 billion people. The demand for protein will exceed our ability to procure it. Keep that thought in mind here, because they're actively destroying the areas where we increase the highest quality protein, which is meat. This is Protix. So this is the company that has joined forces with Tyson there. They won the Technology Pioneer Award by the World Economic Forum for their bug protein. If we dive over here, they're the leading insect company. Protix is the world leader in insect ingredients. We believe that feeding the growing world population should go hand in hand with protecting our beautiful planet. Huge challenge. Fortunately, the solution lies in nature itself. Insects provide low footprint proteins and other nutrients that can be processed into more sustainable feed and food. More sustainable feed. They're talking about feeding animals that we eat, chicken, pork, beef, feed bug protein, and then putting it in our food. Since '09, they've been perfecting insect ingredients that help feed and food manufacturers bring healthy and sustainable nutrition to the world. This is our call to all caring heroes, game changers and innovators. Join our mission to bring the food system back into balance with nature. Just really quickly, a couple of things. Australia, they've approved 3 insects for eating. So this has happened. Singapore, they've approved 16 insect variants for human consumption. One restaurant in Southeast Asian nation is already gearing up to sell lychee balls with crispy chili crickets and sushi topped with silkworms, the Straits Times has reported. So the reason why I have a big problem with this, Brian, is they talk about climate change and then they go and cover prime agricultural farmland in this green energy deal, solar, taking it away where we can produce high quality protein, which is, beef, pork, chicken. And they cover in something that's going to end up in a landfill in the next couple of years. This is all mandated from the WEF. Both the bug protein, eat the bugs, own nothing, and be happy. And this green energy deal that is here in Australia, the amount of money that's gone into it, and our electricity is one of the highest places in the world for electricity. And then also at the same time, they're destroying the best farmland in the world. Australia grows the best beef in the world, and I'm sure some people in the States will disagree, but it seems like all of this is coming together. First off, I'd like to get your thoughts on, are you pro for eating bugs? How do you think about approaching eating bugs, adding them to your diet? And then on top of that, not having the choice, because if you're carnivore or you're eating meat, that animal has been fed with bug protein before it even gets to you.
I honestly think this is great news. I really do. I hope that as Tyson goes all out with their implementation of bug protein, that it causes a mass exodus of customers from Tyson Foods. I think that this could be one of the best things ever. I look at it like CBDCs. People say all the time, are you worried about CBDCs? No, I don't think I'm not worried at all about CBDCs, because that will be the best marketing campaign for Bitcoin in human history, right? Everybody will see the value of good, healthy money when directly in opposition to unsound, tyrannical money. Well, we see the same thing with food. Now, there's people that they're waking up. There's been a mass awakening of people to how, what's in their food over the last 4 years, 2 years, 10 years. I mean, there's a perpetual awakening of people. I think that this is going to be another critical moment, a critical escape valve for people to get out of this system. Here in Southern California, people call it California, where I live. We live in tyrannical California, but there's pockets of liberty and freedom. The education system's really bad here. But guess what? Almost everybody that I know over the last 4 years has taken their kids out of the school system. So there's a whole cohort of people here that are homeschooling, and it's a unified front, because all these people. And now when we started doing that a few years ago, we were like the only one of our friends that were doing that. Now we have a pretty large friend group, because I live in the same town that I grew up in, and we just literally dozens and dozens of families have opted out of that system. That's what happens when people cross the line. It causes an opt-out, and it weakens the institution that did it. Now, they do it with hubris. They think that, because we're Tyson Foods, we can do whatever we want. But guess what? They decided to get into business with a company called Protix. Is that not the most disgusting name for food you ever would? I would not put something called Protix into my food. That's hilariously awful.
Yeah. What I find so insidious, I like that way of seeing it, is people will have a mass awakening if there's a large enough outcry. But I guess the media gaslights us so much, and they ramp up their propaganda machine with this misinformation, disinformation, or even if it is factual information, the bugs, they're high in protein. Long term, we don't know what that effect is going to have on our diet. Traditionally, we haven't eaten them, especially here in Australia. But they're doing these things sort of undercover or in a sly roundabout way. Like if I share Tyson Food here on Wikipedia, the people that they feed. So they supply Yum Brands chains, chicken to KFC, Taco Bell, as well as McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, Walmart, Kroger, IGA, Beef O'Brady's, small restaurants and prisons. In that regard, like, I feel like the majority of people, even though there is this big mass awakening, say 80 to 90% of the population is still asleep. They are going to places like Burger King, Wendy's, etc. They're not going to know that they're eating these bugs. Like, it's forced on them in a roundabout way. So I guess one thing for everyone here that's watching live or watching the replay, we're aware that this programming is coming out and they're going for that push. Like, what happens for those people? They just eat it, they accept it until there's a consciousness shift and they get awareness around it?
Yeah, I mean, that's the unfortunate side of the free market. I mean, I don't know if you'd call this a free market move. I mean, I don't think it's not a free market move. I'd say the free market option is for us to opt out, right? And so in a free market, there are people that continue, they're low information shoppers. Low information consumers will always bear the brunt of what big corporations do. The crazy thing is that low information consumers are typically the first ones that are getting their information from TikTok about how bad corporations are, and how evil, these profit-driven corporations are. Well, guess what? When you're spending time focusing on things that are irrelevant, you're not listening to things like Good Day Bitcoin with Sean. Unfortunately, you don't understand that these things are happening, and so yes, you bear the brunt of it. That's a fact of life, and so it's an unfortunate reality. But I think that's where the maybe not the burden, but maybe the onus is on those who do know to share this, right? I mean, every one of us should be sharing this episode today with a friend. It's as easy as copying and sending a link or reposting it on Facebook. Use the tools of the establishment to undermine what they're doing. I think, I could see, and I think this is a very possible reality. There should be pro-freedom or high information people with signs out in front of Taco Bell saying, "Hey, just so you know, your gordita has bug meat in it." I mean, we really should have people that are staging things like that, right? Being mobilizing and doing that. So if you want to not just opt out and have your vote with your dollars, if you don't think that's enough, you can go beyond that. And there's all sorts of free market alternatives that you can do in terms beyond boycotting, right? Information awareness campaigns are massive, and they're actually very effective. And guess what? You don't need to move the needle by 50%. Taco Bell, if they're implementing Tyson Foods bug protein into their foods over here, which is just, I keep saying Taco Bell, I don't know how big it is in Australia, but in California, Taco Bell's on every street corner. If you don't need to drop their profits by 50%. If they implement a new strategy and then their revenue drops by 7 or 8%, that means that equates to hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars over the course of a year for an establishment like that. And so you don't need to move the needle in these massive ways. We only need to move it incrementally for people to shift, right? The cost savings of bug protein might not be enough for them if they see a higher drop in revenue. So if they save 3% because they switch to bug protein, but you guys opt out and drop the revenue by 7%, well, guess what? That's a net loss of 4% that the market just imposed on them.
Yeah. So I guess the biggest message is to put out awareness for people, whether it's share the video. That's why we're making this video today, is just to be able to create awareness. I can see some people talking about, I'll bring it up. This is really good here. Paul DeBellis, it's never based on choice, it's forced direction. Like the COVID treatment was a choice. I'm more worried about CBDC off-ramps. So I find that pretty interesting. Sorry, my camera is glitching out this morning. But obviously there is a way to be able to opt out. Bitcoin is that parallel system. Brian, I just want to touch on this briefly and then we'll come back to the book at the end. But basically when I read, I do not know what's going on with this camera, but the Matrix doesn't like this.
Tyson Foods is doing their work. Yeah.
Brian's going to be full screen for 2 secs while my camera comes back, but you should be able to hear me, everyone. So parallel, Brian, I'll get you to touch on it, but I see it basically as the blueprint of how to use Bitcoin in the parallel system to be able to opt out of this insanity that's going on. In the book directly, you talk about meeting your local farmer, whether that's chicken or for both chicken and eggs, or your cattle farmer, going down to your local and just getting them to accept Bitcoin and not being subject to it. But while I sort out my camera, if you can just give us a quick rundown on the thesis of how to use Bitcoin within the parallel system to escape the tyranny.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of different ways, and that's why the book covers a bunch of different tactics you might want to take. First of all, the first step is you don't need to force or impose Bitcoin on anybody first. I would say go make those connections. Now, you can use tools that's why I'm a big proponent. Even before I was on the team at Orange Pill App, I was a big proponent of Orange Pill App. The whole point of Orange Pill App is to meet other Bitcoiners locally. So you can use tools like that. If you want to use Nostr, if you want to use Twitter for those things, that's fine. But there are plenty of tools that you can use to make economic connections with other people. Orange Pill App just happens to be very, very good at helping you find local economic connections. And once you establish relationships with locals, if you say they weren't on Orange Pill App and you had to go and you had to find a local rancher that doesn't accept Bitcoin yet, that's fine. Stage one, they don't have to be a Bitcoiner, or they might be somebody that holds Bitcoin but that doesn't want to transact in Bitcoin. That's okay. But having those interactions with that person, being a regular purchaser of that, or maybe sourcing your meat from a few different local vendors that abide by the practices that you like. Yes, use your dollars, use your fiat to interact with them. That's fine. But guess what happens? More often than not, because of that type of person, because of somebody that raises food in an ethical and sustainable way, they will tend to have a lot of similarities in principles and philosophies that align with the Bitcoin ethos. Now, a lot of people think that Bitcoiners are weird, or they're in it for get rich quick schemes, things like that. And so as you have more interactions with these people, they have the opportunity to see how Bitcoiners work, to see how Bitcoiners operate. Every time I pick up meat from my local rancher, I get to interact with either him or one of his ranch hands, one of his staffers, right? You get these interactions with people that you don't get to have with Tyson Foods, right? So the way we impose our power on Tyson Foods is just simply by opting out. But the way we get to impose our influence on a rancher is literally by the words that come out of our mouth, right? Hey, have you considered accepting Bitcoin? Oh, no? Okay, cool. And then guess what? The Canadian trucker thing comes along a few years ago. And then you bring that story up to them. Hey, did you hear what happened to those Canadian truckers? That's kind of scary that you could have your bank accounts shut down. Well, now they see that happen. They see Tyson Foods come along with oh, wow, the narrative is going to be that if we want to be green and we want to save the environment, that we have to stop, raising cows. We have to stop raising chickens. We have to stop raising animals, and we're going to have to switch over to bug protein. Well, I don't want to do that. How am I going to be able to continue to operate? Well, Bitcoin is going to be a viable option for that person. So they don't necessarily need to switch over to the Bitcoin circular parallel economy immediately. But what you need to do is you need to start teasing that. You need to start presenting that as a feasibility. Your every dollar or every sat that you transact with is a vote. That's the big thesis of the last chapter of Parallel. It's called the last chapter is called Every Day is Election Day. And it's not a political chapter. It's really not. That actually the crux of that chapter is that, I think that voting in your elections, if you want to do that, please go ahead and do that. Voice your opinion. But think about it like this. In an election, it's a zero-sum game, right? So if say there's 100 million votes in an election and one of the politicians gets 51 million votes, well, guess what happens to the 49 million votes that went against that politician? The very next day, those votes are irrelevant, right? That the guy that got 51% of the votes gets 100% of the power. He gets to hold the office, and he gets 100% of that power. That's how a political vote system works. But in an economic vote, whether it's dollars or sats, let's imagine now that there was a company that, say, last year they did $100 million in revenue, and then they do something that you don't like, right? Maybe half the population doesn't like it, or almost half the population thinks that maybe that was woke, or that was, now they're going to this ESG narrative. And so you decide, okay, I'm not going to buy that company's product anymore. Well, last year they did 100 million. Now this year they only do 51 million, right? So even though they still got 51% of the dollar votes in that from what they did before, the $49 million of votes against that company, every single one of those matters. So yes, it's not like they get 100% of the power. They actually get 49% of their power diminished through the free market. And so when you extract those dollars from that company, and then you plug that back in to the parallel system, it has the power of two, right? You're subtracting one vote from the existing system and you're adding one vote to the parallel system. So when we opt out of the old system, it has the power of two. And that, guys, every time you have the ability to have the power of two with your transactions, take that initiative and run with it. And you don't have to change the system in one day. Stacking these votes day after day, one vote here, one vote there. I'm going to start to listen to Rumble a little bit more. I'm going to use Fountain for my podcast a little bit more. I'm going to start to use these parallel systems. You don't have to change everything tomorrow, but incrementally we move that goalpost. And after a year, after 2 years, a lot of change can occur. A lot of change can accrue by enough people working together.
Just talking about like opting out with your vote or putting, sending the signal where you want the world to go. What are your thoughts roughly like with Camilla versus Trump, with what's going on with Bitcoin? Trump's obviously coming out fairly pro Bitcoin cryptocurrency, not as in depth as RFK has been, not as in depth understanding. Camilla looks way off the bat, at least from my position here in Australia. She has been in talks with quote unquote cryptocurrencies. How do you see like the vote playing out in the mainstream consciousness in regards to Bitcoin with the election cycle?
Yeah, well, on that note, I mean, one of the interesting things that just happened, I think it was yesterday in a speech that Kamala did, was she started saying, guess what? We're going to move to do no tax on tips. And that's been one of Trump's big campaign promises for like months and months now. So she's literally taking these populist ideas, because I think there's going to be in some of these battleground states like Pennsylvania, a lot of the pundits are saying if you win Pennsylvania, you're going to win the whole election, because that's just a very valuable state, because it's a toss-up state, and it depends. I think that clearly Trump has the high ground on the Bitcoin for a Bitcoin voter. If you're a Bitcoiner and you're voting, you're probably going, and if that's your most important issue, you're probably going to vote for Trump, even though it was very clear after the Bitcoin Nashville that he doesn't have a robust understanding of Bitcoin. That's very evident. But as a voter, I am appreciative, and a Bitcoiner, I'm appreciative of the fact that he's bringing it to the forefront. RFK was the one that opened that door. Trump's the one that made it a bigger deal. And so I think if the recent history serves us correct, if Kamala stole that no tax on tips idea, I think the Bitcoin advocacy and larger crypto advocacy, unfortunately, is going to be right behind it. She's got Scaramucci, she's got Mark Cuban, and some of these guys that are appealing to her and having closed doors meeting with her. So I think that we're going to have much more positive discourse around this stuff. Whether she means that, I actually don't think that Kamala means it. I do think that Trump would legislate, or not, he's not a legislator, but I think that as an executive, I think he would be pro Bitcoin. Unfortunately, he'd probably be a bit pro crypto as well. But Kamala, I think she would use it as a campaign promise. I don't think she would execute on it as the executive. Either way, I think that I don't think it's going to move the needle for either one of them, because I think they're going to nullify one another, right? On the tips thing, they've nullified each other now. That was smart on Kamala's, because I think that's where Trump had the high ground. Right now, Trump has the high ground on Bitcoin. I think Kamala is going to remove some of that high ground amongst the liberal voters, right? There's lots of, if you look at any of the data, there are a lot of liberal left-leaning Bitcoiners. A lot of people don't think that. They think they're all libertarians are on the right. That's not true. There's a lot of libertarian, apparently Bitcoiners. I don't know if that's kind of crypto, kind of Bitcoin. It can be the data can be kind of rough, but if Kamala gets those people to come back to her side, it probably doesn't take a lot to move a pro Bitcoin liberal back to the Kamala camp, where Trump might have had a shot at those people a month ago.
Yep. One of the things you said is, they're going to go on a a platform of both Bitcoin and crypto. Unfortunately, I've got my own thoughts around crypto. I think it is aligned with dishonesty, greed, lust, avarice. I don't think it's good for the human soul. I believe it's just fiat 2.0. Obviously, very biased, diving deep down to the Bitcoin rabbit hole. But what are your thoughts on maybe the positives or the negatives that crypto has against, I guess, Bitcoin adoption, freedom, money, allowing people to be a sovereign individual? Does it help? Does it hinder? And what are your thoughts on altcoins in general? Because it is going to be a massive talking point in the next coming months.
Yeah, I think the great side of crypto and exchanges and all the centralization that is in that industry that is very like, you know, as Bitcoiners, we recognize that that's a very negative thing. The very positive thing that's come out of that, look what happened after the FTX collapse or the Celsius collapse, or name the institution that collapsed and then didn't get a big government bailout, right? Like those were supposed to be the financial institutions of crypto, and they failed. They acted irresponsibly, and they don't get bailed out. If anything, they're actually getting kind of regulatory clamp down on them, right? They're getting kicked a little bit harder. It's the exact opposite. It's the inverse of when banks fail. Banks get bailed out. They get regulatory easing and all sorts of things that actually help. And like FTX people or Celsius, I mean, these guys were getting sued, or Sam Bankman-Fried went to jail. What happened after the great financial crisis, the banking scams that went on? Like nobody went to jail after the great financial crisis. So the positive thing was, in the wild west of crypto and institutions and exchanges, we saw the way that it should play out, right? If you do criminal activity, you should go to jail, or you should go to prison, or you should be sued, or you should have to recover as much of the funds and act on behalf of the people that you screwed over. So I think that's the positive thing that came out of crypto. Now, I hope that doesn't reinstitute trust in crypto. I hope that what that does is that shows that, hey, you don't need big government to bail people out. Guess what? I had plenty of friends that have gotten scammed on altcoins. I've had plenty of friends that had money on Celsius that when they lost 40 or 50% of their funds, they got some of it back. But guess what? The fact that they didn't get bailed out allowed them to have one of the greatest investment learning lessons that they've ever gotten. And every one of those guys says, okay, I went through it. I lost some of my money. I am a better investor. I'm wiser and more prudent with my money going forward because I got screwed over, right? If they just had FDIC insurance on their Celsius account, then they wouldn't have learned that lesson. When Celsius 2.0 pops up, they're going to put their money back in there. And why is government perpetually on the hook for these things? It's because the consumers don't learn their lesson. The government's just going to bail me out again. And so we just return, like a dog returns to its vomit, is what the book of Proverbs says. A fool returns to their folly the way a dog returns to its vomit. But guess what? When reality hits, we didn't get bailed out. And so therefore we either had to learn, or some people headed for the hills. If some people went back to fiat land, that's fine. Do you? But the rest of us who have been through crypto, who have operated in the blockchain space or whatever you want to call it, we either leave or we become hardcore Bitcoiners. And I think that's where you and I are right now. We're on this Bitcoin maxi side of things because we've learned our lessons and we've seen the error of going down that other hole.
100%. And on that note as well, this maxim, not your keys, not your coins, I believe it's like the single most important thing after buying. So you buy your stack, is removing into self-custody, taking your Bitcoin off the exchange. How important do you think it is that people actually put in the proof of work, learn how to hold Bitcoin in self-custody? Otherwise, the parallel system doesn't really work, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I just doubled down. It's not a really good show off. I have my titanium plates that I just got in, so I'm going to do a new wallet this afternoon. So yes, I mean the greatest power you have, whether you live in a democracy or an authoritarian regime, the greatest power the sovereign individual has is the ability to say no, the ability to turn to the man and just flip him the bird and say, screw you, I'm out. Right now, in an authoritarian regime, there might be greater consequences for doing that. But if for most of us, we live in Western civilization, we have some degree of freedom to say, screw you, opt out. The biggest way to say, screw you, opt out is to put your Bitcoin in self-custody. That is the biggest opt out of the old system. You're literally taking dollars out of the central bank fiat Ponzi scheme and you're putting it into sound money. You're disempowering the old system. And like I said, it has the power of 2 votes. It's a vote against the old system and a vote for the new system. And you're securing it in a way that, think about it, like if you bought Bitcoin and then held it on an exchange and it got stolen, it's going from hands that, yes, like you weren't smart, you didn't cold storage your coins, but you would have been diamond hand, you would have been a hodler, right? You would have been holding your coins, and now it's in the hands of a scammer who's just going to go liquidate those coins. And so it went to weak hands, or it went to scammy hands, just evil hands, right? It went into from the hands of the good to the hands of the bad because you didn't act prudently. And so it's so important for us as sovereign individuals to protect our property. I was just having this conversation with my wife earlier. We were talking about AI and disrupting jobs, and she said, well, I think that the government's just going to, they're going to have all their own AI robots and they're going to take all the jobs. And I said, well, that's why it's important for you to have your own tools, to have your own personal property. Like if we all have the ability to buy a robot, it's important you buy your own robot before that can do your work for you and that you own, right? The power of personal property is so very important, because guess what? If we get to a day and age where we don't have the option to tell the government no, then we've lost our power. So you need to do everything in your life to make sure that no matter what it comes to your kids' education, to what you eat, like with the Tyson Foods thing, or with what you watch on the internet, or whatever it is, the ability to say no is so very important. And securing your Bitcoin, securing your money, securing your property is the ultimate resource that allows you to say no. Right? If my country is starting to do things I don't like, and I have money that I can take anywhere in the world, well, I can opt out of my country and I can go to El Salvador, right? Like that's the ultimate no vote against what my country just told me to do.
It reminds me when the WEF says that we'll own nothing and be happy, and that's their 2030 agenda. And basically when I read about it, yes, all the conspiracy theorists, tin hats, and sometimes I put a little bit of that on. But really, like, my most sensible takeaway is they want humanity to be in a place where they're perpetually renting everything. Like Microsoft, on my computer, I pay for that subscription each year. The streaming service, I pay for it each month. The streaming service each month. Amazon, Netflix, whatever it is, we're not really owning that many things each day. So I think what you're saying, Brian, is having that sovereign money allows you to be able to buy things and be in a place where you can purchase them outright. I believe, like with the quintillionaires, or the gap between the haves and the have-nots is growing bigger and bigger, and the people that have private property rights are going to do just fine. And I guess that's why you're on the mission that you are, that I'm on the mission that we are. We can sort of see these things happening. I like what you said about robots. Like, we've got a vacuum robot upstairs. It's got a LiDAR instead of a webcam, so it's not scanning the room as much out there. But like, we haven't needed to vacuum the house really like for years. Occasionally we'll mop it, but we've called the robot Ruby, and she just goes around and she does the work. And we try beat her to bed. She turns on automatically at 7:37 each night. And if we can get in bed before the robot comes out, it's a good day. But having these tools absolutely great. But if we're in a place where we had to rent them, or you weren't allowed to buy them, or you had a state-funded robot vacuum, well, then it is scanning the room. It is looking at everything around you, what you're up to. It's listening to you the whole time. And I think just being aware of that like on all levels, and this is a superficial level, but the amount of time that it saved us in our life by not having to we clean the house, but not having to vacuum the house is absolutely amazing. But I think from like that, don't trust, verify, be like, all right, like a robot vacuum, it can create value in our lives. It can get our time back. But there's a good one and a bad one. Say the Roomba, for example, at least I don't know if they do it anymore, but the camera was going around in people's rooms and they saw like their rug was a little bit old, or their couch was a little bit old or something, and it'd start serving them ads to get them to be able to buy. So it's keeping people stuck in that consumer system. And when they're stuck in that consumer system, they need earned income to be able to buy those things that they keep doing. And it sort of just keeps the fiat model going. Whereas if same device, robot vacuum, but from a Bitcoin mindset. Hey, I don't want it to scan my room. I don't want it to have a webcam. I just want this thing to save my time. Let's go with that. Or same thing with the meat that we were talking about at the start. Hey, I need protein. What's the best? What's going to give me the most amount of longevity? Bitcoin is a lot of them against bug protein. Maybe I'll do it if I need to survive. I got lost in a jungle, the airplane crashed, and I need to get out. Sure, like that's absolutely great. Or I'm going on a holiday to Thailand. I want to try roasted crickets or whatever for a bit of fun. Great, but that becomes a choice. And having the money to be able to choose is fantastic. It's when we don't have the power to be able to choose. They can do whatever they want as long as we still have choice. And I think Bitcoin is that choice. With it, what are your thoughts, just talking about food for a sec, what are your thoughts on like seed oils and stuff, and as well as seed oils, chucking another thing like fluoridation in the water?
Yeah, no, that's great. So my wife, I got to give credit to her. She's the reason why we eat healthy. I'm the one that's taken the time to study Bitcoin, but I have a partner that she's done a deeper dive. She's probably done a deeper dive on food than I've done on Bitcoin, and I spend a lot of time on Bitcoin. So in our house, in our cooking, we cook with butter. We don't cook with seed oils. To be honest, my knowledge of that's pretty limited. I know that it promotes inflammation and things like that. But yeah, I couldn't probably give you a really robust reason for why we don't cook with seed oils or why we don't have them in our foods. But I know that the seed oils are in the fast food. When I go out, if I do go out and I eat fast food, I know that the food that was prepared with seed oils just makes me feel like garbage. So there's probably plenty of reason, probably because the meat's not very good and high quality, but then it's also cooked with low grade products. So I can just from a practical standpoint, I can tell the difference between eating high quality food and low quality food. Now I think that there's a blessing in that, because back when I was young, when I was a teenager and all I ate was low quality food, Cheerios for breakfast, and I ate, Pop-Tarts for a snack in the middle of the day. And I ate garbage food all the time. I actually didn't feel too bad from garbage food because I was like fairly active as a young kid, and I didn't realize like the wreckage it was having. I used to drink sodas all the time. Like as a kid, I would drink 2 Cokes and I feel fine. If I take a sip of a Coke today, I feel like grossed out. I feel disgusted because my body, I've detoxified, and I've cleaned it out a little bit. And so I don't like soda. It actually makes me feel sick when I eat it. So there is something interesting when you've removed yourself from it. It's like anything else. When you move back a little bit, when you separate from it, you tend to gain a little bit of perspective. So I couldn't give you the documented reasons for seed oils, and I'm sure I know you've done your homework on this, but I can tell you that when I eat food that's prepared with seed oils, I feel more inflamed. I don't feel good. I don't feel like I want to go out and go for a run. I can force myself to go do it, but I can tell you after I eat good, clean food, I feel energized and ready to go. So from a practical standpoint, it's just, and you going back to the Tyson Foods thing is like, I was thinking about it when we were talking about it earlier. There's so many things that get put into this food that we don't even consider, right? Like when you go back to why everybody had celiac disease, and there was this whole, thought of like, man, we need to get gluten out of our food. Well, when you dig down into it, a lot of the wheat, the way that wheat was being processed was that it was being sprayed with herbicides, right? You would have these giant fields of wheat, and in order to harvest all the wheat at one time, you'd have to spray it with herbicides so that you could kill all the wheat, and then you could harvest it all together. And so you think about how they're going to process this bug protein. Well, how do you make sure that if you have millions of insects that are alive in their habitat, well, you don't just wait for them to die off one at a time. You're not going to pick those things out one at a time. You need to make sure that all your bugs are killed at the exact same time. Well, what type of chemical will you need to use to make sure all those bugs in that habitat are killed at the same time? You're going to need to use pesticides. You're going to have to douse all those millions of insects, those crickets or whatever you're putting into your food. You have to make sure they die at the same time so that you can process that food all together. So these things are going to be riddled with pesticides and all sorts of chemicals that aren't they're not going to be on the ingredient label. So just because something's not in the ingredient label, it is important that we have high information signal about the stuff that's going into our food. So that's why shows like this are so important. You dig down into the details that are beyond just the, hey, this is what the nutrition label says. Well, the nutrition label is never going to say that wheat has herbicides on it, and it's never going to say that bug protein has pesticides all over it. And so the reality is that our seed oil is bad. I like I said, I feel bad when I use them, but I also don't know what's going into the processing of these seed oils. Like the seed oils themselves could be bad, but there could be all sorts of unintentional things that get thrown into these products to make them cheaply and to mass produce them. And so when things are mass produced, quality tends to go out the window.
Yep. The reason I bring this up for everyone on a Bitcoin show is when you look at Brian, he's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He owns a wellness company called Salt and Life. But like if we just look at the Bitcoin price here, 59,130, I'll hit refresh. Maybe it's a little bit higher, a little bit lower. I believe Bitcoin pretty much spot on. When we hold Bitcoin, it is our chance to be able to opt out outside the system and not be subject to the tyranny. But unless you have wealth, you have absolutely, unless you have health, you have absolutely nothing in life. Like all the wealth doesn't matter. There's so many people who get to the end of their lives that have accumulated massive amounts of wealth and then be like, my biggest regret was not looking after their body. They're dying young, or they're living out their retirement years, or even from middle age with pain, broken bones, or whatever it is. With the agenda that's coming, with inflation, like everyone's suffering because they doubled the money supply in the last 4 short years. When we opt out, when we hold Bitcoin, when we stack Bitcoin, now we've got something that's going up in purchasing power that is just a superior form of savings, but a money outside the system, which is true wealth. And when you have true wealth, then you have the capacity to be able to buy grass-fed steak. Like yesterday, I went to the butcher's after the gym and bought some Black Angus rump, and I don't really like rump steak in general. Porterhouse is probably more my go-to, but it was Black Angus and it was big there. I'm like, I like Angus, we'll go for it. And just to be able to do those things and trial it is absolutely amazing. I think it's going to get harder and harder for people to be able to have the food that they want, just like for the everyday person. And that's what I care about, the most amount of people, because when everyone starts saving and Bitcoin changing their life, getting a little bit of health behind them, stepping up with their health, they're going to pass that message on. And that's how humanity, society as a whole gets better. And we have this Bitcoin parallel economy. So talking about all the food stuff, Brian, I appreciate going into it, because I don't think there's anything more important than health. I think that becomes before wealth, but without like a base level of wealth, it is very hard to be able to have a high level of health.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, yeah, I mean, you look at it, traditionally, the people that have always had access to the best foods and the most nutritious or most nutrient dense foods are going to be those who can afford it. And that's just the sad reality. But if that is the reality nonetheless, then if you want to be a sovereign individual, if you want to try and have a sovereign family unit for those around you, then providing a level of wealth and financial resistance is going to be a critical element. And like you said, I mean, just doubling down on that health component. I mean, I always like going back through this if I'm ever kind of like feeling wavering or anything like that in any of my about anything that we're doing. In terms of health and that sort of thing, the importance of health is like, you think about it, what would how much money would a 90-year-old billionaire pay to be 30 years old again, right? I mean, he would pay every cent of his money to be young and healthy again. He would say, yeah, I don't care if I have no money. If I'm young and healthy, I could start back over from scratch and do it all over again. I would have the energy and the zeal and the zest and all that kind of stuff to get started back over. He would pay every cent of his wealth in order to be healthy and young again, right? And so we are presented with that right now. Whatever state we're in, yes, we could always maybe be a little bit healthier, but at the same time, we have the ability right now to make those decisions where it's not a hypothetical. It's not what if I was a 90-year-old billionaire? It's like I'm a 38-year-old man that has the sovereign choice to decide what I put in my mouth, what I do with my body, all that kind of stuff right now. And so, yes, I want to think with that long-term perspective of if I was a 90-year-old man and I got to flash forward back to the 38-year-old version of me, what would I do? Well, that's wisdom, thinking ahead and acting as though I'm an old man in a young man's body. That's the embodiment of wisdom.
Talking about wisdom, you've been in Bitcoin for a lot longer than I have been. There's been a little bit of a debate the last couple of days in regards to being able to trade Bitcoin, the highs and lows, trying to time the top and get back in the low of the cycle. My message here is to buy, stack, and chill, which ultimately means just to save in Bitcoin, not to be able to trade it over a 5-year period. The minimum that it has ever done is 100% or 98.9% profit for the average price over that year. So if your money's doubling every 5 years, but if you're in the inflation system, you're losing about 12, 15% to be kind in that same 5-year period. I think that's just the better way to be able to approach it, provide value to society and get fiat or earn in Bitcoin and save in Bitcoin. But what are your thoughts? You've obviously been here a whole lot longer than me. You know a whole lot of other people that have been here since the very, very beginning. Should people be looking at all these models, these charts? Are they useful to be able to trade, to be able to accumulate more and more Bitcoin? Or how do you see it? Because I believe getting as much Bitcoin as you possibly can at a time right now is going to allow you to be able to live a life of wealth and health, but also to be able to pass that on. There's no point having wealth, like health aside, unless you're going to do good in society to be able to pay it forward. But what are your thoughts, Brian?
Yeah, I think the number one way to get alpha on your Bitcoin is to start participating in the Bitcoin economy. Now, people say, oh, I don't want to spend my sats. That's okay. The book makes a pretty solid, I think, justification for why you could try to spend your sats. But say if you just under no circumstance do I want to spend my sats, that's fine. Just start telling people that you accept sats. Whatever you do in the fiat world, somebody's willing to pay you fiat for it. Well, somebody's willing to pay you Bitcoin for it as well. There's a lot more people willing to spend their Bitcoin, especially for high quality things, especially for the privilege of interacting with other Bitcoiners. But there are plenty of Bitcoiners out there that will spend their Bitcoin. So you can participate in the parallel Bitcoin economy and get alpha on your Bitcoin. If your goal is to get more Bitcoin, more sats tomorrow than you have today, then just start doing work for those things. And I think that trading, in my experience and the experience of many people that I've talked to, trading is akin to gambling. Maybe somebody out there has a foolproof system and something that works 100% of the time. If that's the case, I can tell you, I've heard a lot of people tell me that, only for 6 months later or for a year later for me to ask them, hey, how's your trading system working out? And they say, oh, I stopped doing that. Well, they don't ever say, oh, I lost a bunch of money. They just said, I stopped doing that. Well, I'm telling you, dozens and dozens of people later that have told me that they were trading at one point, they stopped doing it because they lost Bitcoin. So in their pursuit of more sats, they lost sats. I mean, you can look at, there's all sorts of data of it in any given year. If there's 10 or 15 days of Bitcoin price pumps and you happen to be in liquid cash on those days, you miss like 90% of the upside of Bitcoin in a given year. And so if Bitcoin was going to be up 100%, you're only up 10% on your Bitcoin or on the fiat value of it because you were in cash. You were in the thing that you don't believe in, trying to get more of the thing you believe in, which actually got you less of the thing you believe in. And so I went and spoke at a hedge fund in I won't say where it was, but I've been fortunate enough. I've been getting invites from these hedge funds to start going and explaining Bitcoin to senior investors, like senior citizens who are these high net worth people. Pretty incredible experience that I get to fly out and literally just pitch Bitcoin like a Bitcoin salesperson. It's pretty fantastic, the level of interest amongst these people. But I'll tell you what, unfortunately, it's nice, but it's sad to see. So now I'm in these text threads. People say, hey, can I add you to our text thread? And so it's these people who are new to Bitcoin. Some of them are dabbling in crypto and they're all talking about trading. They're talking about Rune. Did you know Rune was up today or Rune was down? Or do you look at the ascending triangle or descending triangle? And I just tell these people just kindly as I can every time. It's like, guys, I've seen this. I've been in Bitcoin for 11 years now. And I've seen the cycle. I did it at one point myself. And every market cycle, there's new people who come in and they think that they can outpace the growth of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is it's designed, whether maybe this is an inflammatory statement, Bitcoin is a number go up technology. It's a scarce, finite asset. Actually, it's finite in a infinitely increasing world, right? We have the universe is increasing infinitely at light speed. The human population's increasing. Well, I don't know. Maybe in some places it's not, but there's the economy's growing.
Debatable.
Like, that's debatable, I guess, at this point. Productivity, I think, as lazy as people are getting, AI is going to make productivity explode. And so you're going to have all sorts of increases in GDP, but Bitcoin has a finite supply. And so when productivity in an economy increases, Bitcoin is scarce. The only thing that can happen to Bitcoin is that the value of it can go up over time. And so if you want alpha and you're holding Bitcoin and it's in cold storage, you got your alpha. Don't worry about anything else. The only other alpha you can add to Bitcoin is just perhaps earning a few more sats for the things you do.
Yeah. And I think I'm going to make a short clip of retiring in Bitcoin. Like, I've been asked to do that, and I've been playing around with a little bit of the numbers, and that's where I got the 98.8% profit from over a 5-year period. But saving in Bitcoin, spending in Bitcoin, and then earning in Bitcoin, I don't think somebody that's just gotten into the space that hasn't been here for like a full cycle at least should spend it, or if they do spend it, spend and replace. Like I spend and replace, but I don't even count that, or really I just grab fiat, put it into Bitcoin, and then use that straight away and just put it into Lightning to be able to pay for whatever it is. I just think of that in my own mind as just spending, because it's just fiat going straight in. But after that 5-year cycle, as you are saving more and more and more, the flywheel effect of your money doubling every 5 years. And after that first one, so 98.8% was the lowest gain. The second lowest gain after that over a 5-year period was 200%, like pretty much exactly on 200%. So it's just about being here and spending a whole lot of time in it. But that power of Bitcoin just grows and grows and grows, and allows people, I guess, to be able to progress more and more. For everyone watching, if you've got any comments or questions that you'd like to ask Brian, would like you to drop them in the comment section and bring them up. While you are doing that, shout out to today's sponsor, the Bitcoin Way. Basically, the whole team is designed to be a cybersecurity expert, to be able to get you to a place where you know how to hold Bitcoin in self-custody, to be able to run a node. And I want to talk to you about running a node, Brian, in a sec. But to be your own bank, to be able to have a Swiss bank account in your pocket, the first 30 minutes is free. The team's the best. They're endorsed by Safety and Moose, Natalie Brunel, Simply Bitcoin, Bitcoin News. They've been on Forbes. They're at Bitcoin Prague. They've been on the Bitcoin Standard podcast with Safety many times. And then protecting, locking down your internet infrastructure, and then diversifying with their citizenship. As you go down the rabbit hole, these are good things. But just number one, securing your Bitcoin, top of the description, first 30 minutes is free. While people are dropping questions below for us, Brian, what are your thoughts in regards to running your own node as well? Is it just enough to have your Bitcoin in an air-gapped wallet and self-custody? You're doing all the right things. Your seed's on steel or titanium, which is even better. It's definitely not on paper. But what are your thoughts in regards to nodes?
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on the level of conviction and how much you want to contribute to Bitcoin. I think that it's one of those things where if you're buying and holding Bitcoin, to me, it kind of only makes sense to run a node, because then I'm adding to the security or the sovereignty of my Bitcoin, right? The fact that I'm participating in the network beyond just being a passive user of it, right? The fiat system is predicated on passive users. We talked about low information consumers before. Fiat, it predicates itself on low information and low and dependent users of the system. Well, Bitcoin, it flips that, and it's the inverse. It's not dependent users that use Bitcoin. I think that any maxi that I know is probably running a node because they're contributing to the network, and it's for selfish reasons, right? And I think that that's what makes Bitcoin a beautiful system, is because the thing that I do that is the most selfish for me, the ability to keep a copy of the Bitcoin software for myself to make sure that it's one more node resistant to attack and corruption. That's the thing that's in my best interest, but it's also the best in the best interest of the Bitcoin network as a whole.
Yep. What are a couple of other things that I believe, like running a node, is absolutely imperative is you can verify that the UTXOs, the coins, the Bitcoin that is in your wallet is actually there. It's not just digits on the screen. You can trust that you have verified. By not trusting, you're verified, which is number one. Also, whatever node you're going through by default may get co-opted. They may prevent you from spending your transactions. Nobody can stop you ever with it. So there's no reason not to be able to do it. And things aren't that dystopian at the moment. You can still do it pretty good. And it's planning for the worst and hoping for the best. But it's just an insurance check, I guess, on your Bitcoin stack. So I'd urge everyone to run a node as well. I look forward to retiring in Bitcoin. Mr. Andrew Droid is saying that. Steve Smith, this quick little health conversation here, but bed by 7:37, I do that, and then we read for a couple of hours, maybe till about 9:30, and then lights off and take the dogs out, then go to sleep. But the hours of sleep that we get before midnight usually are the highest quality and allows us to recharge the best. I also get up not as early anymore. I got blocked from 4:20 a.m. starts was my favorite time to be able to wake up, but now getting up at about 6 or exactly on 6 now. But what are your thoughts in regards to whether it's going to sleep early, but just having like a proper sleep schedule and how that impacts like how you function in the world? Because you're doing some pretty epic things. If you're willing, like I'd like you to share what's going on with Salt and Light. If you're willing to, it sounds pretty epic, but even just the thesis of what the business is, but and like pushing that, you couldn't do that if you're tired and lethargic, and then your Brazilian jiu-jitsu and stuff. So, like to you, I guess, how important is sleep?
You know what? This is. I'm gonna be real. I'm a hypocrite when it comes to sleep. So I need to adopt an earlier to sleep schedule. I'm a night owl and a morning dove. I don't know what you call the morning side of things. I like to be up late and I like to be up early. So I'll usually do a nap in the middle of the day. And I don't think that's optimal. I really don't. It's a schedule I've adopted over the last few years, just with having kids and a part of our self-sovereign lifestyle of homeschooling and things like that. But I think that probably 8 or 9 hour clip just at night would probably be healthier. I'll tell you, I mean, it's just from the side of probably not acting in the most healthy way with my sleep, is that my energy is actually quite a bit lower, even with getting that midday nap. So cumulatively, I might still be hitting 7.5 or 8 hours of sleep, like in a 24-hour period. But it's just like not having it straight through. And again, not having that before. I agree with you that pre-midnight sleep is like ultra critical. And a lot of times I'm getting a lot of work prepped the night before for the next day. And so, yeah, it's maybe I get to bed at 11 or something like that. So I'm not getting a lot of pre-midnight sleep. So yeah, I got to be honest. That's my biggest shortcoming is in the sleep department. But on the really exciting side, I mean, thanks for teeing it up with Salt and Light Wellness. We've had 3 locations. Well, we started our first location back in 2008, my wife and I. We do kind of like alternative holistic health based therapy. So we do red light therapy, we do infrared saunas, salt rooms for respiratory therapy, we do cold plunges, and we do sunbeds for people who can't get out in the sunshine. And so these are kind of like supplements. I mean, you think about it like if you take a supplement because your diet isn't getting all the nutrients you need, this is the exact same thing. It's that same thing with light or with alternative treatments. We've been doing that for 16 years now. And the cool thing is popular culture is starting to catch up to that now. I mean, we've seen an absolute boom in things like infrared sauna and red light therapy and cold plunge over the last few years. And so it's just fun to be a part of something like that. And so one of the really cool things is we started a few months ago, or probably 9 months ago now, we started a licensing operation, kind of like franchising the company. And so next week we have everything's agreed to in principle. Next week we signed the contract for our first licensee. So we're excited to announce that Salt and Light is expanding, and we actually are going to have another Southern California location here pretty soon. So just super cool. If there's any listeners in California, we're doing all of our operations, our expansions in California right now. But you just go on to saltlightwellness.com. And there's a link to apply to become a Salt and Light licensee. So if anybody finds that business model exciting, which I can assure you that the business is picking up, because people are really getting behind this stuff. People are getting really excited about holistic alternative wellness. Man, I'm so pumped on it. And like I said, my sleep is my biggest weakness. Unfortunately, I am running four companies right now. And so that's one of the downsides. As we ramp up in this next phase, I will be able to delegate more. So I'm going to be able to restore my sleep, a bit more, but I'm still probably about 6 months out from a good sleep schedule.
Yeah, there's a book, I can't remember the name, but it talks about the impacts on what happens to your brain and how the body doesn't repair properly with sleep. And I'll find what it is and I'll pass it on, Brian. And it's pretty interesting because we're going through a startup phase, or a couple of startup phases at the moment here. And I've just prioritized sleep because I haven't in the past. But I guess like in the capacity where you've got sufficient income, you're counteracting the deficit in your sleep with high quality food by being able to do those things through salt and light there to be able to recharge, because the body can get energy from many ways. Like I will recharge in the sun and with steak, and then go for a walk on the beach. So I think like cumulatively, if we can just like work towards optimal peak performance, it's a journey, not a destination at the end of the day. But while Brian's a bad influence on sleep, hopefully one person takes away that the best hours before sleep are nice and early. We've got a question here from Mr. Android. For Brian, is multi-sig a must? I understand people say if you have a big amount of savings, you should, but do you think it's really necessary? Isn't passphrase enough?
Well, I mean, it just depends on the level of risk. I mean, the reason why people with larger amounts opt for multi-sig is because of the security elements of that, right? The physical ability for somebody, if we have our seed phrase on steel somewhere, then that's one attack vector for it, right? The physical finding of your seed phrase. Now you could secure a singular seed phrase in multiple elements, right? You could make a singular seed phrase, even 12 words, kind of like a multi-sig, right? You could store 4 words in 3 different physical locations, right? That's one way to do it. So all of these things have pros and cons. Now the downside of that would be if you can't recover 4 of those words, then that's a vulnerability for your security model. So the best thing to do is to run kind of war games on whatever approach you take. If multi-sig is the approach you take, well, work out a logical war games of, if I have a multi-sig, say my mom holds one sig for me, I have another, I have a friend in another geographical location that has one as well. Okay, well, what are the shortcomings of that, and what are the positives of that? I personally think that, yes, I mean, from a mathematical standpoint of, am I worried that if I had all of my Bitcoin on a singular seed phrase, am I worried that a computer out there is somehow going to crack that seed phrase? No, I'm not worried of that security vulnerability. I think that's, if you used a genuinely randomized seed phrase, you didn't just pick your own seed phrase because you like the words or something like that. There's a high vulnerability to that. And by the way, for anybody that doesn't know, there are computers out there that are constantly guessing. They're compiling just various seed phrases, and they're putting catalogs together of these things. And if that happens to be a Bitcoin seed phrase, they will sweep whatever Bitcoin are under that seed phrase into a general wallet. They will take those funds. It's virtually impossible for one of those computers to guess your seed phrase unless it's if it's not a randomly generated seed phrase, it's almost impossible for one of those computers to guess that seed phrase. So just make sure if you do have a singular seed phrase, you're randomly generating your seed phrase. Now, again, what are the vulnerabilities there? If you have a ledger and ledger is generating your seed phrase for you, you're providing an element of trust back to ledger because their hardware is generating that seed phrase for you. So there are random seed phrase generators. You can watch a BTC Sessions video. He can show you how to generate a seed phrase with dice by rolling dice, and it makes your seed phrase completely random. So I am perfectly happy with a 24-word seed phrase. I think that I would be happy with securing $1 million of Bitcoin with a 24-word seed phrase. But if you can provide more security with the multi-sig, why not do that? It's not difficult to do, and it just adds an extra layer. So I wouldn't be scared if you have a singular seed phrase, but if you can, why not do better?
Yep. And I think for most people, it's just a process. But number one, just get your Bitcoin off the exchange and do the 12 or 24 words. First, do it the right way, and then progress. Like somebody is saying, run the nodes, the second step in that journey after becoming a Bitcoin maxi. But all these things, Bitcoin is incredibly new. It's interesting when you're like, oh, I'm responsible. There's no CEO. There's no bank manager I can call. Like if you lose your funds, if you misplace it by mistake, like buy Bitcoin, all that hard work, that proof work's absolutely gone. So it is something different that I guess we haven't really been used to, and especially in Australia in the socialist society, there's the government's here to look out after us. They're here to be able to bail us out. If somebody, like there's a cyber attack on the bank will reimburse me for my money. So it becomes a little bit scary, but it's not very hard. Obviously, the Bitcoin Way can help out. BTC Sessions is an absolutely fantastic resource in the Bitcoin space. Reading all these books, Parallel has been in the description ever since the book came out. There's a link there, as well as your first book, Bitcoin Evangelism. And Brian, I truly think this is the second book that somebody should read in their orange pill themselves, because we can't orange pill somebody else. I think Beers for Bitcoin is the first, the quickest, the simplest way to get a foundation of what is Bitcoin, and this is like the how and why of Bitcoin. From those two, then go on to the Bitcoin Standard. Reading those three books, somebody's going to be fairly convinced that they should be at least paying attention to Bitcoin, then they can go on that journey. But I think this is absolutely imperative for the Bitcoin space, and I've absolutely loved reading. I was actually claim to fame. Obviously, I did get into the book, read the books to eat the bugs, that quote. Super proud of. I thank you so much.
That's just a great quote. I mean, like, how could you? I mean, that's a banger right there. Yeah.
Because that's their agenda. The WEF, as we saw at the start of the show, literally wants you to eat the fucking bugs. And I don't want to eat the bugs. If you want to eat the bugs out there, ladies and gentlemen, like, be my guest. It's your body. It's your choice. I don't care. But for me, I want to be able to have the option, the capacity, the wealth to be able to opt out of that system that I think is absolutely fucked up. Like, I don't want to. And I think to be able to get there, to be able to get the conviction, not to trade your Bitcoin, to be able to save in Bitcoin, you need to put in the proof work by studying Bitcoin, through reading the books. And the conversations we're having, they're great, and we can cover many different topics by stacking books on top of each other and going deeper and deeper. You're going into the author's mind where they've really focused, or they condensed thousands of hours into learning into a book that I read in a single day. Like, why wouldn't you do that to give yourself the chance to be able to escape from whatever it is they have? And, you know, like, we see 15-minute cities, everything that's going on, 5G, whatever they're spraying in the clouds, you know, if you want to put on the tinfoil hat with the vaccines, everything like that. When we're paying attention, we can see that it's all going on. We can just say, no, I don't need to do that. And if you force me to do it, I'm just going to fucking leave. And I've got the opportunity. So go fuck yourself, to the government or whoever it is that's trying to impose something on you that you don't want. And later down the track, you may change your mind, but at least initially you've got the time just to be able to sit back and think it through properly instead of buying whatever the experts are saying when they tell you to trust the science. You can be like, you're saying trust, maybe I'll just take a moment to be able to verify. I'm going to hand the floor over for everyone. Definitely repost this video. I will put Brian's X below as well. Oh, you've got a YouTube channel as well where you're putting out some shorts. So I'm going to pass the floor over. Why start another Bitcoin YouTube channel out there? What's the messaging behind it? What's the point of it? What's the style of it? But also like just a message for people, because I know talking about the WEF and stuff can seem a little bit dystopian. These people seem to have their hands in every single pie around the world. So maybe shine like a little bit of light back onto the space and finishing us on a positive note, Brian.
Oh, you know me. I'm going to bring the positivity just like you, my friend. Okay, so yeah, why the first question? Why start another YouTube channel? Like how many Bitcoin YouTube channels do we need? Well, we need one more. No, I'm just playing. No. The whole point of the channel, my first book is called Bitcoin Evangelism. As you can tell from my answers, Sean asked me a question and then I talk for 4 minutes. Like I'm incapable of short form communication. Bitcoin Evangelism is 300 pages, Parallels, almost 300 pages, or some versions of it are over 300 pages. They're smaller. And I like to just dig into thoughts and just tediously lay them out. And then the books are nice because I got to refine them and kind of shore some of those things up a little bit. But with the YouTube channel, all I'm putting out are shorts right now. And it's an homage to the first book, Bitcoin Evangelism. So all these shorts are, hey, if your friend has a question like, well, I think they could just change the code so I don't trust Bitcoin. Well, guess what? There's a short for that. Or how big is the U.S. national debt? Like putting that in perspective in kind of these axiomatic terms. Like there's a short for that to help your friend understand like why the U.S. debt is unpayable, right? So these little these rebuttals that people have to Bitcoin. B is for Bitcoin, the Bitcoin Standard, Bitcoin Evangelism. Those books will answer that question, but most of our normie friends aren't going to take the time to read those books. Those books are for us, right? Those books are for us to be able to have the answers and things like that. But if you just want to send a 40-second video to a friend, that's what these shorts are aiming to be. So if you want to subscribe and get those shorts, I put out a couple per week. It's just my name, Brian Dement. It's just a YouTube channel called Brian Dement. So there's no frills or anything like that. It's not monetized. There's like 1,000 subscribers. It's nothing big. It's just meant to be a catalog for YouTube or for Bitcoiners to be able to orange pill their friends. And then the positive light on everything, that's the heart of Parallel. The reason why I wrote that book, it's based on this thesis that if you look at every time there's a collapse of empire, which sounds dystopian at first, right? But I assure you that there's light at the end of the tunnel here. Every time there's collapse of empire, a parallel system springs up in its wake. So whether you're talking about the fall of Rome or the fall of the Persian Empire or the fall of the Soviet Union, every time there's collapse of empire or there's a collapse of the old world order, there's always a parallel system that springs up in its wake. Now, it's always decentralized, but unfortunately, decentralized systems are very disorganized. So after the collapse of the Soviet Union, you basically just had these little circular economies. They weren't even like a full parallel economy, but it was a non-state economy because people were just trying to get food for their family or gasoline for their truck so that they could take a shipment somewhere, right? These parallel economies that weren't sanctioned by the state always pop up. And so that's the interesting thing. This always happens 100% of the time when the state collapses or when the empire collapses, parallel systems pop up so that people can survive. But after a half generation or so, 5, 10, 15 years later, the state regains power, right? So after the Soviet Union, Russia reabsorbs power. And so that parallel system, because it was so disorganized, it wasn't strong and robust enough. It was just enough to kind of keep people eking along. The state regains enough power. So the parallel systems are always reabsorbed into the state economy. Now, here's the interesting thing. Bitcoin provides humanity's first time ever. Literally, this is the first time ever that the parallel economy is being developed before the collapse of empire. So Bitcoin is, it started in 2009. But we've actually had parallel activity on the Bitcoin network in the Bitcoin economy happening for the last 15 years. And it's ramping up. There's more people accepting Bitcoin today than there were yesterday. On Orange Pill app, we have merchants popping up all over the place. So you can go find brick and mortar businesses on Orange Pill app who will accept Bitcoin in your neighborhood. If you want to go buy a taco, or if you want to go, get a massage, or whatever you want to do, there's merchants that do those things, right? So that parallel system is being built. And the empire will always collapse. The old way of doing things, like when Sean talks about the WEF has this plan or whatever, I know it sounds scary, and because yes, maybe we have to see a lot of oppression happen before the empire collapses, but people thought that the Soviet Union and all the practices that they were doing, that they were going to become this insurmountable organization that was going to have perpetual power because the state is so powerful. But what happens? Eventually, the Soviet Union collapses. People think the WEF, they're so all powerful, they're so all knowing. Guess what? The paradigm of the WEF will eventually fade away. It will crash and burn, and that paradigm will shift. But what will remain, what will rise from those ashes, is the parallel Bitcoin system. And guess what? Because the parallel Bitcoin system was being developed before the collapse of the old paradigm, it has an opportunity to live far longer and in a much more robust way than any other parallel system in human history. So that's the optimism of today. And that's kind of what's before us. We have the option to opt into that system right now. So yes, you don't want to spend your sats today, totally fine. But if you put just in your Twitter bio, say you're a local plumber, and you just say, hey, I'm a plumber who accepts Bitcoin for my services, all of a sudden you're plugged in and contributing to the Bitcoin parallel system. Like Sean said, running your own node, securing your own Bitcoin, all those things are steps to reinforcing and sustaining the parallel Bitcoin system. So whatever you do, whether it's big or small, you're contributing to something that's never existed before. And again, it represents humanity's first time ever to create a system that, like we talked about earlier, gives people the ultimate power as a sovereign individual. What's the ultimate power as a sovereign individual? The ability to say no. And when you have a parallel system, you have the ultimate ability to say no.
Mate, so epic. And the best bit for everyone, Brian wrote a whole book on it, the why and how of opting out of the dystopian regime into a system that rewards proper proof of work. Truly, the book is absolutely amazing. I read it in a single day. I urge everyone to try and beat me to be able to do it, or just take the time and go through it slowly. But it is a must read on how to opt out through that parallel system. Brian, it's been an absolute pleasure. Let's not make it so long next time.
That's why these shorts are teaching me something. I'm learning how to be quicker with my words. I'm getting better, though.
Yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen, please. I mean, not long in talking, mate. I can listen to you forever, but long in not come back onto the show sooner is what I've tried to say.
I'm just trying to give you a hard time, my friend.
Yeah, tripping me up here, ladies and gentlemen. Please do something nice for yourself, for somebody else out there. We'll see you on the next show. Be blessed. Peace. A quick message about today's sponsor, the Bitcoin Way. If you still have your Bitcoin on an exchange, or you're using a hardware wallet that's not air-gapped, it's not open source, reach out to the Bitcoin Way. First 30 minutes, it's free. The team has over 25 years cybersecurity experience. They can help you take your Bitcoin into self-custody. Safety Moose, the author of the Bitcoin Standard, endorses this team. They'll never touch your keys or your coins, but they'll empower you to become self-sovereign. They can teach you how to run a node, can assist with multi-sig, cybersecurity, inheritance planning, running VPNs, and so much more. And the team, they can even help you obtain a second passport. Bitcoin, it's generational wealth. Learn the skills today. I've put a link at the top of the description. And again, the first 30 minutes is free.